What if one of Hollywood's most admired leading men had a truth he could never reveal? On screen, he was the fearless Wild Bill Hickok. Off-screen, Guy Madison lived a life of secrecy, his private letters now hinting at hidden loves with stars the world thought they knew. This isn't gossip, it's history. The story of a heartthrob who carried a secret in silence. Guy Madison was born Robert Ozell Mosley on January 19, 1922 in Kern County, California. Growing up during the Great Depression, his childhood was steeped in the humble rhythms of small-town life, where every penny counted and every chore was a reminder of survival. Days were filled with the smell of plowed earth, the crowing of roosters at dawn, and family meals around a humble table. It was a world that valued hard work and perseverance, where dreams were often small because life demanded practicality. For young Robert, the idea of Hollywood stardom was a far-fetched one, a fantasy for a boy whose future seemed rooted in the ground beneath his boots. After graduating from Bakersfield College, he pursued a career in ranching, a choice rooted in his upbringing. His goals were simple and practical: work the land, raise livestock, provide for his family, and someday own his own farm. During those years, he carried the quiet dignity of a man who did not seek the limelight. His hands were made for work, and his future was measured in crops and harvests, not in camera flashes and advertising signs. But life, as usual, had other plans. When World War II broke out, Robert joined countless other young men in their service. He enlisted in the United States Navy and became a radio operator in the Pacific Theater. The vastness of the ocean, the constant hum of machinery, the discipline of life on board ship. These experiences shaped him. They taught him resilience, humility, and a deep respect for duty. The war had forged in him a kind of unyielding strength, a kind of masculinity that seemed genuine and unshakable. It was not the kind of strength honed in the gym or honed in front of the mirror, but the kind born of perseverance, hardship, and sacrifice. Ironically, it was this quality that would later be what Hollywood audiences loved most about him: the quiet, dependable hero who wore his strength like a second skin. During a brief stay in Hollywood in 1944, fate intervened. The city, with its palm-lined streets and the twinkling lights of its studios, was a far cry from Kern County. Robert, still a sailor on leave, entered Hollywood with no ambition other than to enjoy his time ashore. But fate found him. Talent scout Henry Wilson, a man notorious for spotting raw beauty and turning it into a sought-after star, saw Madison and immediately recognized something rare. His handsome looks, imposing physique, and all-American macho charisma, he was not only attractive, he was formidable. That same year, Madison was cast in his first film role, a small, uncredited part in the wartime romance Since You Went Away, 1944. He had almost no lines, but he didn't need them. The camera was fascinated by him, lingering on his face as if it had been created by fate itself. Audiences noticed, too. They might not have known his name, but they remembered his face, his jawline, his determined gaze, the image of a soldier both familiar and legendary. Studio bosses took notice. Legendary producer David O. Selznick didn't hesitate to sign Madison. Almost overnight, Robert Ozell Mosley disappeared, replaced by Guy Madison, a name chosen to sound strong, pure, and all-American. Hollywood had its new golden boy, and the movie machine began to shape him accordingly. He was styled, trained, and fashioned, his rough edges polished into the perfect model of the post-war man. Advertisers crafted his image, photographers captured him in ideal poses, and the press portrayed him as the man every woman wanted to marry and every man wanted to be. The roles came quickly. Until the End of Time, 1946, Madison starred opposite Robert Mitchum as a returning soldier struggling with the hardships of post-war life. The film resonated with audiences adjusting to a new world after years of conflict. Madison's sincerity, though sometimes criticized by critics as stiff or forced, carried a weight that connected deeply with audiences. They didn't see any actors, they saw themselves, their brothers, their husbands, their children, their neighbors. His next film, Honeymoon, 1947, further cemented his reputation as a noble, well-rounded American man. Critics may not have been entirely convinced. Some found his acting too stilted and stiff, but audiences didn't care. What Madison possessed was not technical virtuosity or charisma, but a quality that was harder to define: authenticity. He was believable, he seemed genuine. In an era when Hollywood was flooded with actors who shone with theatrical charisma, Madison's charisma was quieter, more grounded, deeper. The studios knew exactly what they had. In Madison, they saw a blank canvas on which to paint the ideals of post-war America. Strong without being arrogant, manly without being ruthless, charming without being over the top. And Madison, with his natural humility, fit the bill perfectly. Behind the scenes, he was no scandal seeker or attention seeker. He lacked the arrogance that was so common among his contemporaries. He arrived in Hollywood not as an ambitious dreamer, but as a man thrust into the world by chance, guided by forces beyond his own control. As the years passed, his career grew. He became a household name, the kind that draws fans to movie theaters and fills magazines with smiling pictures. The boy from Kern County who dreamed of a simple life among cattle and fields was now a Hollywood phenomenon. Yet through it all, traces of his past remained evident. His childhood humility, his military discipline, and his deep sincerity all were the foundations of his career. Guy Madison's journey from small-town obscurity to rising Hollywood star is not a story of ambition realized, but of destiny discovered. He never set out to conquer the screen, but the screen found him, embraced him, and lifted him to new heights. And in the hearts of audiences across America, Guy Madison was more than just an ordinary actor. He was the embodiment of an ideal, a living image of an age when America needed heroes both real and imagined. But even as his face graced lunchboxes, posters, and comic books, Guy Madison was hiding a truth he couldn't speak. In the 1940s and 1950s, being gay in Hollywood was not only taboo, it was considered career suicide. Careers were ruined by gossip, and studios kept a close eye on their stars. The industry was in the business of image, and Madison's image was gold. Strong, trustworthy, the epitome of pioneering masculinity. Admitting who he was would shatter the illusion that sponsors, parents, and children had all relied on. From 1951 to 1958, Madison donned the cap and badge of Wild Bill Hickok in The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok. The show was groundbreaking in its format, being one of the first to be broadcast simultaneously on radio and television. At a time when television was still a novelty, Madison's policeman rode his horse to homes across America every Saturday morning. Dressed in cowboy gear and riding proudly, he brought justice to dusty towns with his comic sidekick Jingles, played by Andy Devine. The combination was perfect. Madison's calm, serious demeanor was balanced by Devine's awkward sense of humor. Children laughed at Jingles' antics, but idolized Madison. He was the straight-talking, reliable hero who always did the right thing. The show's success was immediate and enormous. Kids wore toy gun holsters around their waists, imitating Wild Bill's sharp drawing. The comic sold millions of copies. Posters adorned bedroom walls. Lunchboxes with Madison's face on them became prized possessions on school playgrounds. He wasn't just a TV cowboy, he was an icon of post-war American culture. For many young fans, Guy Madison was the American West. Parents loved him too. In an age when families huddled around a black and white television set, Madison represented safety and the values they believed in. He never crossed the line into cynicism or darkness. He was polite and kind, even when he held a pistol. Sponsors loved him for the same reason. By all accounts, he was a charismatic figure, a clean-cut cowboy for an America yearning for stability after years of war and unrest. Behind the camera, Madison worked tirelessly to perfect his role. Despite having no formal acting training, he always did his best to meet the physical demands of the role. The long hours of horseback riding, the stage gunfights, and the weekly production discipline required stamina and dedication. He may not have been the most technically skilled actor in Hollywood, but his sincerity and sheer presence made him believable. That sincerity kept audiences loyal week after week, year after year. Yet while the world saw him as a straight-laced cowboy, Madison led a secret life away from the spotlight. The pressure to maintain appearances was constant. Hollywood gossip columns never dared to publish the truth, but danger was always lurking. A careless photograph, a betrayal of trust, could turn everything upside down. Madison persevered, balancing his private reality with the public role he could never relinquish. By the mid-1950s, The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok had become more than a popular series. It had become a cultural icon. Madison's Wild Bill represented the values Americans wanted to see in themselves: courage, loyalty, honesty. To children of the time, he was more than a character. He was a role model. To studios and financiers, he was a brand. Yet for Madison himself, he was both a blessing and a cage. The role immortalized him, but demanded silence about who he really was. Despite his success on television, Madison continued to act in feature films throughout the 1950s and 1960s. He never wanted to be confined to just one role, no matter how iconic Wild Bill Hickok had become. For Madison, the Western was more than a genre. It was a calling card, a canvas where his stoic masculinity and quiet strength could shine. During this period, he appeared in a steady stream of westerns and action-adventure pictures that kept his face on the big screen and his name in the public's imagination. Among these films was The Charge at Feather River, 1953, a movie that gained notoriety not only for its story, but for its innovative use of 3D sound effects, which placed audiences right in the middle of battle scenes. Arrows seemed to fly past their heads, gunshots ricocheted across theaters, and Madison stood at the center of the chaos, a calm yet commanding presence. While critics debated the gimmick of 3D, audiences thrilled at the spectacle, and Madison's rugged charm anchored the film. It was proof that he could carry a feature even outside of his television fame. But Hollywood is always changing, and by the late 1950s, the Western, a genre that had dominated for decades, began to wane in popularity. Television had saturated the market, and audiences were hungry for new stories, new heroes, new frontiers. For many actors, this shift meant the end of their careers. Yet Madison was not content to fade quietly into obscurity. Instead, he adapted. Like many American stars of the era, he looked overseas, where European studios were churning out their own variations of the Western. Italy, in particular, became the new frontier. The rise of the spaghetti Western in the 1960s opened a door for actors like Madison, who brought authenticity and name recognition to productions filmed on rugged landscapes that doubled for the American West. These films were often shot quickly, with smaller budgets and less polish than Hollywood productions, but they carried a raw energy that resonated with international audiences. Titles blurred together, but the formula was irresistible. Sun-scorched duels, mysterious gunslingers, and the eternal battle between good and evil. Madison, with his commanding posture and weathered face, fit seamlessly into this world. Beyond Westerns, Madison also took roles in European war films, expanding his range while keeping busy in a competitive industry. He was no stranger to the physicality such roles demanded. Years of naval discipline had instilled in him a work ethic that never wavered. He showed up on set prepared, delivered his lines with conviction, and treated at every production, whether Hollywood studio picture or low-budget Italian Western, with the same respect. He never phoned it in. That professionalism kept his career vibrant and won him admiration from colleagues, even when the films themselves weren't destined for critical acclaim. By the late 1970s, after more than 3 decades in front of the camera, Madison gradually stepped back from the spotlight. The Hollywood that had discovered him on leave from the Navy had long since transformed. Genres had shifted, studios had changed, and new stars had taken the stage. Yet Madison remained content, proud of the journey he had taken, from small-town California to Hollywood stardom, from American television screens to European cinema halls. Even in retirement, his legacy endured. He became a beloved presence at classic film festivals and Western conventions, where fans, some who had grown up watching him as Wild Bill Hickok, others who had discovered him through reruns and old film reels, lined up for autographs and photographs. For many, Madison was not just an actor but a link to a golden era of Hollywood, when cowboys ruled the screen and heroes were cut from simpler cloth. In 1996, Guy Madison received the prestigious Golden Boot Award, a tribute reserved for those who had made lasting contributions to Western film and television. Standing on that stage, decades after his Hollywood debut, he was honored not just for a single role, but for a lifetime of work that had shaped the mythology of the American West. The award symbolized his enduring place in the pantheon of Western stars and ensured that his contributions would not be forgotten. Madison's journey from naval radio operator to Hollywood golden boy, from TV cowboy to international star, was never about chasing glory. It was about discipline, sincerity, and a quiet commitment to his craft. His face may have disappeared from lunchboxes and posters, but his legacy lived on. In the memories of fans, in the reels of film preserved in archives, and in the mythic image of a cowboy who always rode tall in the saddle. In 1949, at the height of his fame, Guy Madison married actress Gail Russell, a fellow star known for her haunting beauty and emotionally raw performances in films such as The Uninvited, 1944, and Angel and the Bad Man, 1947. To the public, they were a glamorous couple, the perfect Hollywood couple, 2 charming young rising stars who seemed to embody the magic of the silver screen. Their pictures filled fan magazines, and to audiences who followed their lives from afar, their marriage seemed like a fairy tale. But behind the closed doors of their studios and shadowy apartments, their relationship was anything but picture perfect. Russell, a deeply sensitive and introverted woman, was burdened with social anxiety. Alcohol became her escape, her shield against the relentless demands of fame. At first, Madison was there for her with patience and gentleness. But as his career began to soar, especially with his starring role in The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, the burden of her illness weighed heavily on their marriage. The distance, both emotional and physical, between them grew. He was often on set or away on business trips, while she battled her demons alone. By 1953, the rift had become too deep to mend. The couple separated, and in October 1954, their divorce was finalized. It was a painful ending, but Madison's character shone through the pain. Unlike many Hollywood breakups marred by gossip and bitterness, he never spoke ill of Russell. Instead, he carried himself with quiet compassion, continuing to care for her from afar, even as their paths diverged. Then came a twist straight out of a Hollywood script. Just a few weeks later, in late October 1954, Madison remarried. In a civil ceremony in Juarez, Mexico, a popular destination at the time for quick marriages and quick divorces. He married actress Sheila Connolly. Best known for her roles in westerns and 1950s dramas, Connolly brought a different kind of stability to Madison's life. Unlike Russell, she shared his love of nature, family, and a more peaceful pace of life. Their early years together seemed promising, filled with warmth and hope. After settling into married life, they built a home that reflected the values Madison had inherited from her large California family. They soon welcomed 3 daughters, Bridget, Erin, and Dolly. Fatherhood became one of Madison's greatest joys. He reportedly doted on his children, balancing his Hollywood commitments with afternoons at home, eager to give them the down-to-earth upbringing he had cherished. However, the realities of show business were rarely conducive to family life. Constant travel for European film shoots, coupled with television roles in the United States, took a toll on their marriage. Long separations turned into permanent separations. By November 1960, the couple separated, and by April 1963, their divorce was finalized. However, Madison never abandoned his responsibilities. He remained on good terms with Connolly and was deeply involved in his daughters' lives, being present at important milestones and guiding them into adulthood. Then another chapter opened in his personal life with a woman referred to in biographies as Scola. Of Italian and Irish descent, Scola had established herself in international cinema with appearances in films such as The Guns of Navarone, 1961. Their relationship was never formalized by marriage, but those who knew them describe it as passionate, layered, and emotionally charged. Scola, like Russell before him, had struggled with depression and alcoholism, but by this stage, Madison was a more seasoned man. Friends say he behaved with more patience and empathy, better able to weather the storms of fame and illness. Throughout the 1960s, the two remained close companions, bonded by affection and loyalty. When Scola tragically died in 1972 under mysterious circumstances, her final gesture spoke louder than words. She named Madison the sole beneficiary of her Screen Actors Guild pension. It was a testament to the trust and devotion they shared, a reflection of a deep but complicated relationship. Alongside these relationships, Madison's paternal legacy continued in other ways. In addition to his 3 daughters with Connolly, he fathered a son, Robert Madison, born later in another relationship. Robert grew up in Italy, where Guy spent much of his career in the 1960s and 1970s, especially during the height of the Italian cowboy genre. Despite the distance between them, both geographically and generationally, father and son shared a strong bond. Guy, already a man who had lived through the ups and downs of Hollywood, imparted to Robert wisdom not only based on success, but also on endurance. He encouraged Robert as he pursued an acting career, imparting lessons in discipline, humility, and the strength to endure an industry that was both glamorous and brutal. From fairy tale marriages to breakups, international romances to the joys and responsibilities of fatherhood, Guy Madison's personal life mirrored the ups and downs of the screen, full of twists, passions, and endurance. Throughout, he remained steadfast, demonstrated not only by the roles he played, but also by the compassion, dignity, and loyalty he showed to those closest to him. To the world, Guy Madison was the hard-faced, soft-spoken star of war movies and westerns, most famously, the legendary Wild Bill Hickok. His good looks, his calm demeanor, his boy-next-door charm, all of it made him a heartthrob of the 1940s and 1950s, beloved by millions. But behind the Hollywood facade, behind the magazine covers and scripted interviews, was a man with a much more complicated and private reality. A reality shaped not only by his fame, but also by the harsh moral codes of the studio system and the ever-present threat of exposure in an era when even a rumor of homosexuality could ruin a career. Over the years, Rumors and whispers have surrounded Madison's private life, stories never confirmed by official records, but often repeated in Hollywood's hidden history. In his posthumous memoir, compiled from interviews, personal letters, and notes, Guy Madison reveals the hidden chapters of his life. These are not studio-sanctioned stories or headlines, but the intimate, quiet but powerful stories of the romantic relationships he had with some of his fellow actors. Men who, like him, lived in silence. Men who loved in the shadow of fame and feared the price of the spotlight. For the first time, names and faces from Hollywood's golden age are revealed. Not in scandal, but in dignity. These are not tabloid stories. These are lives. These are loves. These are men who roamed studios by day and embraced each other by night in secret. Because in an age when a whisper, just a whisper, of homosexuality could end a career, they had no choice. Madison's reflections paint a portrait of resilience, of longing, of human connection that cannot be expressed on screen. His writing is steady but never bitter. His sentiments are rich but never indulgent. He opens up quietly and lets us in. He begins with Ramon Novarro, the silent film icon best remembered for his role in Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, 1925. Madison writes that Ramon was gentler, more spiritual, and wiser than anyone thought. We would meet on quiet streets in West Hollywood or sneak off to Palm Springs on the pretext of rest and relaxation. What we found there was not luxury, but peace, the kind of peace that neither of us could find in our public lives. Then there is Tyrone Power, a matinee idol with a dreamy face and the burden of a double life. Rumors circulated that he was bisexual, but nothing was confirmed, until now. Madison describes him as charismatic, conflicted, and burdened by two worlds, studio expectations and personal truth. Their connection, he writes, occurred during the height of their careers, when the cameras stopped rolling and the masks were removed. In those rare quiet moments, we were just two men trying to understand what love could be when the world refused to see it. Another name Madison revealed was Anthony Perkins, the talented but haunted star of Psycho. Perkins's sexuality was suspected by many insiders, but rarely made public. Madison recalls their time together as brief but memorable. Tony was young, haunted, always a little uncertain about how much he could reveal, even to someone who knew what was going on. We spent a few passionate months together, both excited and nervous. He seemed to be looking back, and for good reason. But perhaps the most poignant memory Madison shares is of Rock Hudson, the Hollywood legend whose death from AIDS in 1985 shocked the world and changed the public conversation about homosexuality in the entertainment industry. Madison describes their relationship as equal parts joy and sadness. Rock had the smile of a golden boy and the soul of a man who had to break himself into pieces to survive. The time we spent together was stolen. Just weekends in Big Bear or quiet dinners at his hideaway in the canyon. But even stolen moments can be immortal. Throughout, Madison is careful not to exaggerate. His tone is gentle, thoughtful, and respectful. This is not a spoiler, he asserts. It's a testimonial, a quiet tribute to important men. These weren't just names, he writes. They weren't just tourists in my life. They were meaningful connections in a world that often denied their existence. We didn't date the way people think of dating now, he explains. It was furtive, secretive, cautious, but real. We laughed, we hugged, we watched the sunrise, and talked about lives we wished we could live openly. Beyond the names and romances, Madison's memoir also illuminates the cost of secrecy and the emotional toll it took on closeted gay men in mid-century Hollywood. He writes of the anxiety, the constant paranoia, the loneliness of concealment, of studio ethics and contracts, of tabloid threats, of publicists who stage fake relationships to satisfy the press. There were times when I thought I was going crazy from pretending, he admits. Every interview, every photo with a co-star, it was all an act. But the real performance never happened on screen. It was in everyday life. Madison, however, did not dwell solely on the shadows. He appreciated the beauty of what they could share. However brief, however discreet. There were small victories, he writes, coded love letters, furtive glances across the stage, the comfort of a hand clasped under a restaurant table. We cultivated happiness wherever we could. In a world that tried to deny love, we still found it. Guy Madison's decision to speak out, even after his death, has shed new light on the forgotten hearts of Hollywood's past. His memoir doesn't just reveal the truth about himself, it also builds a larger legacy, one that honors the LGBTQ+ individuals who shaped and were shaped by the glamour and pain of Hollywood's golden age. They weren't just actors, they were human beings, fragile, complex, hopeful, and fearful. And their stories are finally being heard. After retiring from a long and successful film and television career, Guy Madison chose to settle in the quiet, picturesque Morongo Valley. Nestled in the heart of Southern California's high desert, known for its sweeping views, majestic mountain vistas, silence, and solitude, the Morongo Valley provided an ideal retreat for a man who had spent decades under the glare of studio lights. Here, away from the tabloids and the fast pace of Hollywood, Madison built a spacious ranch-style home that reflected his love of nature, his appreciation of open spaces, and his deep desire for privacy and peace. Over time, the house became more than just a home, it became a sanctuary. Friends recall long afternoons spent sitting on the porch, watching the sun set behind the desert mountains, evenings by the fire, where stories of the past flowed like wine. Mornings spent horseback riding Madison through bushes and sand dunes as if he had stepped straight from one of his westerns. He also gardened, patiently tending the land with the same discipline he had brought to the screen. These pleasures, riding horses, farming, tending the land, have always appealed to him, perhaps because they recall the roles that defined his career, and perhaps because they offer something deeper, a return to a simpler life, a reminder of who he was before his fame. But time never stands still. As the years passed, Madison's health began to fail. He contracted emphysema, a chronic and progressive lung disease often linked to smoking. The disease became more severe, limiting his mobility, making it difficult for him to breathe, and shrinking the world he once embraced so fully. Yet visitors say he still carries the quiet dignity that defined him in his better days. He remains as active as ever, entertaining close friends, exchanging letters and phone calls with former colleagues, maintaining connections to an industry that both elevated and constrained him. His admirers still remember him fondly, not only for his contributions to classic television and film, but also for the warmth and humility that remained long after the cameras stopped rolling. On February 6, 1996, Guy Madison died at the age of 74. He died at Desert Hospice in Palm Springs, California, a facility known for its compassionate end-of-life care. For his fans, his passing marked the closing of a chapter, the end of an era. Many had grown up watching him on the black and white screen, cheering him on as Wild Bill Hickok, the square-jawed cowboy who embodied the post-war ideals of a nation. With his passing, that generation felt a part of their youth quietly slipping into history. Madison was buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Cathedral City, California, a peaceful, scenic resting place that holds the memories of many of Hollywood's most famous figures. His burial there placed him among other stars, a final tribute to the place he had carved out in the entertainment world. The sprawling lawns, the marble headstones, the silence of the desert air, it was a fitting resting place for a man who spent his life balancing Hollywood legend with the solitude of his own truth. The funeral service was modest but deeply moving. Family, close friends, and former colleagues gathered to say goodbye. Not in a frenzy of flashbulbs, but with the quiet dignity Madison had desired. Among the mourners was Don Burnett, a close friend and fellow actor turned stockbroker. Burnett's eulogy was simple but moving. He spoke of his career accomplishments, his steadfast character, and the lasting friendships he built throughout his life. His words honored Madison not just as a beloved actor, not just as the cowboy hero who appeared on lunchboxes and posters, but as a loyal friend, a humble man, a man who lived with integrity, grace, and quiet dignity, even when his truth did not fit the script Hollywood wrote for him. He was a Hollywood icon, a cowboy hero, and a man who carried secrets the world never knew. Today, the silence is broken, and his story lives on. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow, because we'll keep bringing you the untold stories of Hollywood's hidden legends.